Good afternoon and welcome to our Tuesday, May 25th edition of Committee of the Whole. We have regrets from Councillor Dwyer tonight, and CO Morris will turn it over to you for a roll call of staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have with us this evening Chief Cheeseborough, our Senior Planner Carl Grenke, Director Carrie Costello, Vanessa Bernicke is with us tonight, our engineering technologist. She has a report on tonight's agenda. And Nadine Bennett is also here, our Deputy Clerk.
Great, thank you, CO Morris. We'll start with any amendments to the agenda. Seeing none, disclosure of monetary interest. We'll move right in then to 3.1, our first delegation with Tony Humphrey from the Municipal Heritage Committee. Tony, you've got a great background there for us today, and you've got 10 minutes, so it's 5 o'clock.
Okay, let's go. I hope everybody has the handout that was written out about the Heritage Conservation District. This is step one of the process. Step one basically is designating a district. It's our request for you to designate, institute a historic Heritage Conservation District in Smith Falls. In the area we have Arnprior, we have Brockville, Kingston, all have Heritage Conservation Districts, and anybody's going into Brockville, heading downtown or maybe heading down to Don's Fish and Chip, you'll see going over the bridge, you'll see you're now entering our historic downtown core. It's quite an extensive booklet. Most of us in the Heritage Committee have this. It's some very good, I know I'm dull, but I think it's very good reading. If anybody would like to borrow it to really understand what the Heritage Conservation District is, please ask one from myself or one of the other committee members. I'll go right to benefits, because I know when I'm trying to sell something, it's always the best to say, hey, what's it good for in Smith Falls? It's the Heritage Conservation District is a unique planning framework. The immediate benefit of HCD designation is a planning process that respects a community's history and identity. District designation is one of the best ways to ensure that the identity is conserved. The adoption of an HCD plan is part of the designation process, ensures that the community's heritage conservation objectives and stewardship will be respected during all decision-making processes. Step two would be, of course, if council would like to go ahead with this, is to consult with the Municipal Heritage Committee and designate the outlines of what the historic Heritage Conservation District will look like in the downtown core. Anybody have any questions on it? Well, that's even better.
Thanks for Albert. And then Mayor Panko.
Yeah, Tony, this is, you mentioned in your handout that there is, the staff report provides details of the process. There wasn't any other report. I'm assuming that's going to come later at a cow discussion possibly, or?
Yes, if council would like to go ahead and look to see what the designation process looks like, staff will compile a dossier for you and say, hey, this is what it's going to look like. It's quite an involved process, but once it's done, it's very beneficial for the town and for council, because you have a whole district that is protected under the Municipal Heritage Act, and it just stops any how would you say it, violation of what the heritage of the downtown core would look like. You have a say in everything that goes on in that area. You have a yes and no on it. I mean, minor alterations are just, people just go ahead and do them. I mean, if they want to change paint colors or something like that. But it just means that No, we're not going to rip down the Hotel Rideau and put up a parking garage. It has to come to council, and it has council, you know, say this is part of our heritage, this downtown core, and no, this is not what we would like it to look like.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this point in time. I'm sure this is an involved process, and we'll be getting lots more information if we go forward.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Alfred, Mayor Panko, and then Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. I think you answered some of my questions with your responses to Councillor Alfred. But I guess it's something I've been intrigued with in the past, having seen it elsewhere. And I'd like to see us pursue this further, consider it further. I'd like to see the details from staff and understand the process and the pros and cons and what has to happen to make it a reality. So I would say at this stage, I'm supportive of this going forward if we're looking for that. Thank you.
We have various very unique areas in Smith Falls that cannot be identified anywhere else in the immediate area. I mean, every community is unique, and Smith Falls architecture is definitely unique. But our downtown core is something I hope that will be looked at initially.
Great, Councillor Allen.
Yes, I would just like to add to what Tony said by saying that I guess it's 8 years ago now, we had a symposium, heritage symposium, which highlighted districts, and we had special speakers come, and our own Nikki Dwyer did a presentation on one of the ways we could create a historic district in our town. And it was very interesting. And from that point on, I've been hopeful that we would eventually create one. Our heritage committee, when we talked about it, though, felt that we want to include the other side of the river. Her district was just on the side that the town hall sits on. But we've designated, and we are hoping to designate more of those wonderful mansions along the mansion row that will be coming to you as well, and some have already come. But this is just a great way to make sure that we don't lose any of our heritage buildings. And sadly, in our downtown, the thing that breaks my heart when I read the history books about it is that all the fires that we had, I mean, I can't think of another town that has so many spots in the downtown core that has now a mid-century or very modern looking building, but it was because of those fires. And so the precious buildings that are left, I hope we just embrace keeping and make sure that we have the ones we have as we move forward by protecting them. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Any other questions, comments? I think it's a really great heritage educational tool. It's a really great planning tool, and it's an effective tool for design guidelines. So it definitely it's in line, I think, with what we're doing with the CIP. Going forward, Senior Planner Granke had a really great presentation that he brought to the April Municipal Heritage Committee. So maybe if there's consensus with council, we can get a report back from staff. The big step of going forward with this is doing a study, and that study more than likely will have to be completed by a heritage consultant. So, you know, there'll be a cost associated with that. But if we could get more information from Senior Planner Granke, then that's probably a great next step. Is there nodding heads for that? I think so. That's great, Tony. Now, if you want to take off your Municipal Heritage Committee hat and put on your Railway Museum of Eastern Ontario hat.
Okay, I'm changing hats here. Okay. Basically, I'm coming to you over funding for the museum. As council knows, their ongoing relationship with the town and Lisa's contribution to that. I will say at the outset, before I even get started, without Lisa in the past, especially during the pandemic, the Railway Museum would not be open today. The funding that she has applied for and received is keeping the lights on. Our fixed cost, by the way, around $45,000 a year. That's without any staff. That is the cost of our insurance, taxes, water, hydro, the heat, the alarm, and the phone. That's just our fixed costs. It is running us around $3,750 per month. And as I say, without Lisa's contribution in the last year and a half, we would be quite lost. When I came to you before, I had the request for the 20,000 under the program, the community program, and it's not. What has happened is the 20, as we have not paid for Lisa's salary in the 2020 budget year, town is not releasing the 20,000. Do we have 20,000 to pay you? Yes, at this moment we do, but it would leave us completely broke. That would be all the money we have, and we have to, if we're going to open this year, we need money for staffing. We pay the staffing up front, but then we get reimbursed for it, but we still have to pay staff. Like, we need money to pay them, pay for staff. So my request is, I was wondering if the town would cover Lisa's salary for 2020 and 2021. This is exceptional circumstances. I'm 73 years of age and I've never seen anything happen like this in my lifetime. But it would give us the ability and the flexibility to move forward and to open. I'd also like to request that the Railway Museum in Eastern Ontario be moved under the tourism umbrella with the town of Smith Falls. And I'd also like to request that we, meaning the Railway Museum and the town, stakeholders, come together with some kind of operating agreement. So we have a clear focus on what the town expects of us, and perhaps we can put forward what we expect of the town. When I first came to the museum was sat kind of isolated. And I realized to go forward, we must cooperate and work with Smith Falls, because we are as much as Smith Falls is a part of the Railway Museum. So that is basically my ask, that Lisa's, if we could get some assistance with Lisa's salary. As I will reiterate, I don't know what we would do without her. But to go forward at this time, we definitely need assistance.
Great. Thanks, Tony. So just to confirm, there's 3 requests. One is that the community grant request of $20,000 is increased to $40,000, and that it be advanced before the, or somehow it either covers the salary or there's a back and forth transaction kind of thing.
Yes.
The second is economic development and tourism has a closer working relationship with the museum. And the third is that the museum and the town work together on, are you thinking like a strategic plan kind of thing, or?
Yes, exactly. A strategic plan for basically what you people expect of us and what we would like from you, and to negotiate on it. And maybe I could throw in a 4th little one. This is just, we're finding with our lawn care and things like that, the volunteers are bringing their own equipment in. If ever equipment is surplus from the town, I know you sell it by auction. I was the lucky recipient of a lawnmower a few years ago, and I'm still using it. But whenever your lawn equipment is deemed surplus, could the museum get a first crack at it and perhaps purchase some off you? Because it's an area that we're having a bit of a problem with. And for the volunteers to be working doing lawn care when we could have students doing, it's a waste of resources. But that's kind of, we'll call that a sidebar, okay?
All right, thanks, Tony. So any questions, comments? Councillor McKenna.
Thank you very much, Tony, for the presentation. I guess my question is to CAO Morris. Is there a current formal operating agreement? Because I think that's what Tony's referring to as either an updated one, or would this be the first formal operating agreement between the town and the Railway Museum?
Through the chair, so we for each of the past 6 years, to my memory, we've had a grant funding agreement with the Railway Museum to identify the conditions on the funding that the council approves. Aside from that, more recently, we entered a arrangement where Lisa Bell's services are provided to the museum. There's a cap on the number of hours. I think it's around 700 or 800. So that's been in place for some time. So I think the relationship between the town and the museum is well defined based on the way it's been operated in the past. So I have a sense that you know, the town simply provides funding, and the museum applies for that funding, tells us what they're going to spend it on, and then council either approves it or doesn't. And the track record is that town approves it. And the arrangement with Lisa to provide curator services is a fee for service arrangement. And it's that arrangement that's currently in arrears.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair, one more. So and I do know, because I've seen the material out of our tourism department, that the Railway Museum is highlighted as often and as routinely as all the other wonderful draws to our community. But so we do, it's not like the tourism department or economic development has ignored the museum. They've actually done a decent job promoting it. So I'm not quite sure, going under the umbrella of, what does that actually mean? Or do you have a sense of that yet, Tony?
Well, what I'm basically, where we are lumped now is more in a community service. We recognize, like, we always go back to 2019, we had 11,000 visitors. We are a definite tourism attraction to Smith Falls. And yes, tourism highlights us in our brochures, and we are a part of Smith Falls identity. That's where we like to be, and that's where, you know, we think we should be. Are we under, you know, community resources, or should we be in tourism? Because I think tourism is our attraction. I mean, we're bringing people from, we bring people from Montreal, Toronto, just to come to Smith Falls to see our attraction. And when we're here, we know they're staying. We have people come from Pennsylvania. So yes, we believe we are tourism, and and it's my thought that that's where we should be, you know, retained under the tourism umbrella.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Just to make sure I'm understanding it right, the way it works is that because Lisa's under community services, de facto, the museum volunteers primarily deal with community services staff, and that's where that connection comes. It's not that this is an umbrella of the town, or there's a department of the museum under community services as part of the town.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's been my experience. I've been on the board since it began, and I volunteered there and so forth. And it seems to me, especially when we started the Polar Express, which was so successful, that that is our best tourist draw in our community, and it's growing. Each year we get more visitors, and it just makes more sense when you look at our plan that would be under our economic development / tourism mandate, because that's what it's doing for us. Like, the people who are come there now, even for the overnights, are not coming because they want to get away from home. They're coming to have the experience of being in a train asleep. And it's just those kinds of situations that we put people in that is what tourists want. They want sort of real life, you know, experiences. And so it doesn't make sense to me to be under community services instead of out of tourism and economic development, because that's what we're hoping to do. I mean, had the COVID not happened, the Railroad Museum was at a point where we were going to say, hooray, we're out of this. We're going to be really successful now. We won't be needing these grants. But I mean, everything has been, you know, made things much worse with COVID. It's just much harder for everybody.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. We've got Mayor Panko and then Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I mean, we all treasure the Railway Museum. We recognize it's sort of part of that foundation of offerings in our community, and it's unique, and I believe it's very well run and provides a lot of attraction, brings people in from all over. I agree with all that stuff. I think the challenge we have is just how do we handle this particular request? So my preference is we have staff delve in a little bit, quantify a little bit more what's being requested. And Tony, I think I hear from you that the main concern really is just the sustainability of the museum going forward. And like many not-for-profits, I can appreciate the challenge that this brings, especially during COVID. And we go back to your strategic plan 5-6 years ago, I believe it was now, or somewhere around that, which was the objective was self-sustainability at the end of it, and it was all the methods that you would take in order to generate more revenue so it could carry itself. So, I mean, understand completely, COVID has had a significant impact, and without COVID, it's hard to understand where you'd be today, but you'd be in a much better position. So I think we're, personally, I'm sympathetic to the cause, and I'd like to find out more from staff, and quantify that, and try to see what the best plan is going forward to ensure that this continues to remain part of that tourism foundation of our community in perpetuity.
Thanks, Mayor Panko. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the value of the museum to this municipality is undeniable. However, your request tonight, I mean, you've been funded through community donations for the past number of years. And, a number of years ago, we created a policy and parameters for community donations, because before that, it was like the Wild West, as you can remember. It was like people, there would be donation requests come in, council would discuss it, different councils had different views. There was sort of a arbitrary awarding of funds, and so we decided to create a template, a policy to try to take politics out of it. So I agree with the mayor. I think that staff should have a look at this, come back, at a good whole soon, and let's see how we can work together here. But the policy was created for a reason, and I still support it. But I know that Lisa is a fantastic resource for you and for the Heritage House, which I'm on that board. The Railway Museum is a jewel in Smith Falls, but we need to work together and try to find a solution here. So I look forward to talking about it in the near future.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Alford.
Yeah, I'll just echo what some others have said. When I was on council the last time, and Tony came asking for financial support then, and I know how hard they have worked. It's been obvious how hard they worked to become self-sustainable and to be right on the edge of that. But for COVID and 2020 not being able to completely unable to generate revenue, and the recovery that 2021 is going to take, hopefully we'll go back into 2022 and they can get back on their feet. So like the mayor, I would like to see from staff stick the lawnmowers in there too, but I'd like to hear how the town could respond from staff. I agree there is a policy, but we have made exceptions to several policies during COVID. So and again, I do believe in policy and procedure and support it, but there are extenuating circumstances caused by a global pandemic wherein I would consider things I would not necessarily do. So I would also like to hear from staff about how we might be able to, and what the impact of responding to Tony's requests are.
Great, Councillor McKenna.
So I support the suggestions that have been put forward. I just would like to be a little clearer so that staff really understand what we're asking them. And it sounds like I understand we own the Heritage House and we own the majority of the airport. So, but we don't own the Railway Museum of Eastern Ontario. So we're going from being a grantor funder to, it sounds like the request is somewhere in between something that we would have a more formal stake in. So if that's the request, then it's, but I'm not clear yet. So if anyone else understands that, because if we're going to, I think if we're going to formalize this beyond just a grant funding and have an operating agreement, I guess we already do that with the sharing of some staff, but that might be, looks like a purchase of service arrangement or something. So if Mr. Morris has that clear, that this is something between a grant request, which we're very comfortable doing and have done forever, and actually not owning this wonderful asset. So is that what I'm hearing, that we're trying to ask staff, is that possible, or what would that framework look like?
CEO Morris, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so my understanding is that Mr. Humphrey's position was where Lisa falls within the organization and that relationship, as opposed to an equity ownership in the museum. But it would be helpful to confirm the request in very clear terms.
Okay.
I think I'm hearing there's kind of two distinct requests here. One is related to the community grants. The Railway Museum's requesting to double their ask from $20,000 to $40,000, and they're requesting that an exception get made for the fact that they're in arrears to get that money given to them so that they can send some of that money back to pay for their bill from last year and then cover their bill from this year. And then the second half of this is the 2 and 3, and those involve the operational side of things. I'm wondering, are we okay to go through and endorse getting a future COW meeting with the grant request, and then have the operational stuff as a separate thing where staff can work with the Railway Museum a little bit and then come back to council with a report at a future date? But then this would at least get the funding moving when we know that they're operating in a tight cash flows right now. Is that Councillor Alford, you had your hand up?
I don't disagree with how you've stated it. I think in terms of the funding, I'm looking at this more like we have done several grant programs through SBAC for individual businesses. We've changed some, made some exceptions to that kind of stuff. So I'm more thinking about the funding side of it right now, Mr. Chair, and what the town may be able to do. The other is, I think, the CAO has a great say in his operational structure, and I would be, in terms of putting it under tourism. So I would like to hear whatever his thoughts are on that. And I don't know whether ultimately that is even our decision in terms of if it's an operational issue. So I'm leaning towards getting the funding figured out as quickly as possible at the next COW, if potentially then. And to consider, forgiveness of staff costs and go ahead with the community grant or whatever scenarios that staff think might be palatable.
Thanks, Deputy Clerk Bennett. Did you have a?
No, just procedurally, any type of direction on what you'd like. I would suggest that it be added as a priority issue so that it comes out clear as an action item. That's
Okay.
just a procedural item.
So is there consensus to add the funding request under the community grant donations to tonight's agenda, or do we want to have that to come back at a future meeting? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate tonight. I think we need to give staff an opportunity to prepare something and have something fulsome to discuss. I don't want to put that on staff tonight.
Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads for Councillor Brennan's suggestion. Is that the consensus? Okay, great. So we'll get a report back from staff at a future COW on the community grants, and then the operational stuff will be a separate report at a later date. Is that good? Yeah, CAO Morris?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, certainly the grant component, we can do some work on that, but if council or committee's giving us instructions to look at the operation, we need committee and council to provide that direction. That's a fairly significant undertaking.
Okay, I think it'd be good if we could get we need to figure out what the current agreement is, just so we're clear on that. And it sounds like it's a fee for service kind of thing. So maybe if if we could get an update on that, then it would give us some background information, Mayor Panko.
Yeah, just, I guess, if we can have this come back at a future COW with a discussion on the grant and direction to staff at that point on how we want to delve into the operational side, a broader discussion, hopefully within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming tonight, Tony. It's got through a lot, and I appreciate everything you do for the town and the museum and keep our heritage alive. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very much.
So with that, we move on to adoption of minutes. There's a recommended motion. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that the meetings of the May 10th, 2021 and May 17th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting be received and filed. All those in favor? As that is carried. So we'll move on to CAO Director's Reports. CAO Morris, do you want to take the lead?
Yes, we have 3 this evening, starting with Chief Cheeseborough.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, I'd like to give you a brief update on our Municipal Emergency Control Group meeting that was held last week. Across Lanark, Leeds, Granville, we've had a total of 1,714 cases. 1,631 have been resolved. We've had 60 deaths, and currently at that point, we had 21 active cases with 1 in hospital. Across Ontario, we're over 515,000 cases with 8,500 deaths. And across Canada, we've bridged the 1.34 million cases and exceeding 25,000 deaths across Canada. Within the health unit, the region, if we were in the green zone, if the province chose to use the color-coded method, our current numbers would reflect that we are in the green zone. So we've done exceptionally well bringing our numbers down. We've had 1 outbreak in the region. The province dropped the vaccine eligibility from 40 down to 18. There's currently not enough vaccine to serve all those who are eligible. The vaccine clinic for the municipal workers in Smith Falls and Brockville went well. We had approximately 650 appointments that had been booked. We're working on a vaccine program for students 12 to 17. We're blocking off weeks, June the 14th to the 21st, for second doses and student vaccinations and their families. We're currently waiting for the reopening plan to be announced with regards to how the government is going to proceed with the reopening. We did receive information late Friday afternoon following the Premier's announcement that it's going to be a 3-step phased-in approach, and that's expected to begin June 14th. The messaging from the province for all adults is over 18 is to get vaccinated. We had a very good discussion regarding enforcement issues with the heat wave and the need for the public to get outside and how they may conflict with provincial guidelines. Certainly it was a recommendation from the health unit and through our control group that in these times where the heat is excessive, that people do need to get outside. But where the problem lied is there was quite a large number of people gathering at the beach. Both laying on the beach and just walking around through the beach. So we did question the health unit and Dr. Stewart with regards to the enforcement tools in place to deal with that. At that point in time, it was felt that the groups were small enough and that they didn't require enforcement, but we would reinforce the messaging with regards to group sizes. The health unit did provide some guidance on the topic. We chose to open the bathrooms at Murphy Park and Victoria Park that we with regular inspections and maintain the sanitary conditions. Late Friday afternoon, as I'd indicated, at 4:30 is when we received the official word the splash pads could reopen. So we were very fortunate to get that, and we were prepared. Director Manhire had his staff preparing that, so they were ready to reopen Saturday. As indicated, the province also released that tennis and golf would be able to resume with most recreational activities, with the expectation that further reopening would take place in June. There was no external messaging pending the guidance from the province, but we did issue a statement with regards to the reopening of most recreational facilities, as well as golf, tennis, and the splash pads. That is my updates. Oh, I'm sorry, there was one more item. There was a request for the film crew that's coming to Smith Falls to come in and do filming within the building. On Thursday, it was our interpretation that that was not permitted as a result of the stay-at-home order. But we did go through our field officer. We were able to determine that professional filming and film crews are permitted to proceed during a stay-at-home order. So we advised that group that they are permitted to come in. They plan on coming in between June 17th and 19th, which would have been an anticipated reopening for Ontario at that point. But if they chose to come in earlier, that is a permitted activity. That is my update for this evening, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Chief. We've got Councillor Alford up first.
Just with regard to a film crew, who are they affiliated with, and what are they, just out of curiosity, and what is it why do they want to film inside our town hall, or do we know?
Through the chair, my understanding is they wanted to come inside the town hall to do interviews with the mayor and filming with the mayor. I'm not exactly sure what the film crew is planning to do, whether it's a short story or a mini series. But certainly that was their request to come in and interview the mayor.
Thank
Great.
you.
Any other questions for the chief? I have one just on the water trampoline. Now that we've got the play structures open and the splash pad going, do we have any direction on the water trampoline for the park?
At this point in time, no, we do not. And again, we've been put in a very difficult position. We're trying to balance the health of the residents and the children, coupled with trying to get the information from the province. And it seems to be coming out in a disseminated method, not the normal path. And we're left hanging either to a end of day Friday to get direction on that. So we've been actively putting the questions through. We put another question through today with regards to that. But unfortunately, our field officer wasn't able to provide any direct information from the government.
Great, thank you. With the science of the surface transmission and outside stuff, it looks promising, but it'll be great to get that say from the province. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Chief.
So our next update is from Director Costello.
Just trying to get my video up.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting for Ms. Costello, we could jump ahead and do the report that I have, if you wish.
It's not letting me do anything. Sorry, Nadine.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Maybe Director Costello, if you want to mute while get the camera sorted out.
Okay, so I'll want to talk a little bit about an exciting construction project we're preparing to start next week, and that's the Lombard Abbott intersection. I know for many this has been a long time coming, so Monday morning it's going to begin in earnest. So we will be we're working with the contractor as we speak virtually to work out the traffic management plan. Obviously, it's a key intersection. It will be subject to lane reductions and for a period of time, lane closures. So at this point, Monday, the contractor is expecting to mobilize to begin work on the new sidewalk on the south side of Lombard between Abbott and Ferreira. So we have a few things to square away before they begin that work, but that's the plan for Monday morning. That will necessitate a lane reduction in the intersection, likely the left turn lane from Abbott onto Lombard. But we'll confirm that later in the week. Then the plan for the following Monday is to work on in the intersection to do some servicing and start the right turn lane. That will necessitate a full closure of the section of Abbott from Lombard to the Rideau Canal Bridge. So there's no doubt that will be disruptive. We'll be getting information out, messaging out to encourage people to avoid the area, but it is a necessary part of the project. So it's all a bit fluid, but what's important is we're starting and we will communicate those traffic impacts broadly. The other element to this I should share is it's the same contractor that's doing the Cornelia Street overlay project. So we'll be coordinating the traffic management plans, and clearly we don't want both projects underway at the same time, or at least lane reductions in place at the same time. But there may be occasions when we're paving one day after the other on those two projects. So we'll keep you involved. I just want to assure you we're weaving and stitching all those elements together. But it is promising to be a busy summer of construction.
Great, thank you, CEO Morris. So we got Councillor McKenna, then Councillor Alford.
Thank you very much, Director Dunlop, or I'm sorry, CEO Morris. I'm sure he left you the playbook. Does the traffic closure on, let's say, the bridge to the intersection, when we have to close that, is that to pedestrians as well, or how will pedestrians be able to work their way through?
Excellent question. Through the chair, we're working out those details right now with the traffic management plan, which includes, of course, pedestrian traffic. We will, to the extent possible, and with safety in mind, keep pedestrian flowing as much as we can. But good point. We'll make sure we highlight that in the traffic plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Alford.
Not really, more of a comment than a question, and that is that on the upside of that, I suspect that many more people will be able to see our newly redeveloped downtown that might otherwise pass us by.
The glass is half full.
It is indeed.
Any other questions, comments on that one? Councillor Brandon, I can't see you right now if you have your hand up. I guess not. No, it sounds like great, some short-term pain for long-term gain, and long-awaited project. Do we have an idea, CEO Morris, of what, like, do we expect this to wrap up in July, August, or what kind of rough timeline are we looking at?
Yeah, good question. So we've given the contractor till September 1st, I believe it is, to have it finished. We felt it was important to give more runway, so to speak, to make sure they could weave projects together and make it as cost effective as possible. But the fact that they're starting at the intersection first bodes well in terms of a completion date.
Great, thank you. So seeing no more questions or comments, I wonder if Director Costello's
I'm here. My
Perfect.
apologies. As soon as I hit video, it froze on me. I just have some quick updates this evening for council to let everyone know that the Housing Advisory Committee will have our inaugural meeting tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. It will be live streamed, so any of you who wish to watch that meeting, please do so. It is on our municipal calendar on our website, so you can follow those links to watch it. We are going to have two delegations, one being from the county who will give an overview of what the county offers for housing, as well as Senior Planner Grenke is going to give an overview of the housing report that all of you adopted in December 2020 and update the group as to what the actual 17 recommendations are and what their mandate will be. So stay tuned for that one. Like I said, it'll be our first meeting of the group getting together. So I'm hoping it'll be a productive meeting. As well, the Accessibility Committee is going to have their next meeting on June the 2nd, and they will be hosting the meeting during Accessibility Week. Proclamation will be read May 17th to declare Accessibility Week and Red Shirt Day. And finally, the third committee update is regarding the Racism and Discrimination Task Force. They're also having their inaugural meeting tomorrow morning. So that will be, I believe, live streamed as well, and the link should be on the town's website. If not, we will ensure that it is there. Also, a quick update from Planning Services. You will get a bigger planning brief later this week from CAO Morris. But just to let all of you know that Senior Planner Grenke has also been appointed to represent the town on the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority's Regulatory Policy Update Working Group. So he can provide updates to our group as needed on that. But that's everything, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Director Costello. Councillor Alford.
Just in terms of an update, Director Costello, have we received the approval back from the Crown on the parking fines as yet?
On the parking set fines, Councillor Alfred? No, we have
Yes.
not. They've been sent in. Nadine has been corresponding back and forth with them on some minor amendments to wording, but they haven't been approved yet.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I know you guys are doing a fantastic job on preparing people for them.
Mhm.
And I wondered how close we were. Thank you.
Nope, we're getting there.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Director Costello. I think that finishes up our director's report, CO Morris. So we have no correspondence items tonight. We'll go to in-camera issues. The first is a personnel matter about an identifiable individual relating to a committee appointment. We've got a mover, Councillor Brennan, a seconder, Councillor Allen. The Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls is provided in section 2392B of the Municipal Act as amended, move into a closed meeting at 5:49 p.m. to discuss personnel matters related to committee appointments. All those in favor? That is carried. Great, thank you for staying with us. So for 7.1, council moved in camera to discuss a committee appointment. We're going to add agenda item 8.5 to finalize that, and then that'll come to council tonight too. Mayor Penko.
Yes, after we were in camera, and it was identified what after clarity is provided for the understanding of persons involved with the second item, acquisition, disposition of land, I realized that I have a pecuniary interest as a professional relationship with one of the proponents involved in that. I removed myself from discussion and did not take part in any part of that session.
Great, thanks, Mayor Panko. And the Verizon report from 7.2 is that the council gave staff direction on an acquisition disposition of land. So with those out of the way, thank you for staying with us. We'll move on to priority issue 8.1. It's award of contract 21-PW-013 with Vanessa Bernicke.
Thank you. Good evening to the chair and council. I'm presenting report 2162, award of contract 21 PW13 Condy Street Rehabilitation Project. On April 22nd, we released a tender for Condy Street for the milling, replacement of sidewalk, granular excavation, removing and replacing 2 catch basins, placement of a geogrid, granular and 2 lifts of asphalt, and located between Cornelia Street East and Grosvenor Street for a length of 210 meters. On May 13th, we received 5 bids for the work, ranging a price from $440,285 and the lowest bid of $584 HST included from Ottawa D Squared. References and equipment review were completed and found that the contractor is capable of completing the work. Please note, as stated by CAO Morris, Ottawa D Squared were recently awarded Cornelia Street and the Abbott Lombard intersection construction work. The town budget was set for $461,000, which is funded entirely by OSIF funds. The total anticipated cost of this Condy project is $276,055 for the construction, engineering, QA, and contingency. There is an anticipated surplus of $184,945. So great pricing. Therefore, staff recommends council award and execute a contract with Ottawa D Squared for the work on Condy Street. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. This is a really competitive bid, so I'm seeing nodding heads. We'll be really excited to bring that to council. And thanks for all the extra stuff that you're probably getting done for us right now with Troy away. So have a great night.
We're all good. Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll move on now to 8.2, award of contract for zoning bylaw review report with Senior Planner Grinke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For my report this evening, staff are recommending that council accept the proposal by WSP Canada Inc. to undertake our zoning bylaw review and prepare a new zoning bylaw to replace the current bylaw, which was adopted in 1994. The adoption of an official plan is normally followed by a review of the municipality zoning requirements in order to ensure the policy objectives established by council are carried forward, amended, and implemented in the regulatory bylaw. So we're definitely due for a new zoning bylaw, given that our official plan has been in force since 2016. We have a progressive and effective plan that provides pretty solid direction to the town, and it's generally served us well during our period of growth. However, an older bylaw that in some instances isn't entirely in alignment with the OP. And also in response to municipal priorities that have emerged over the few years, we've also undertaken a parking study and a housing strategy, both of which included a number of recommendations to improve our operations and to assess different items. And all of this makes our zoning bylaw ready for a remake, and as such, council budgeted for the zoning review in 2021. In March, we launched and circulated a request for proposals, and on April 23rd, the bidding period closed. We received
CEO Morris, did you want to pick up where Carl left off?
All under, but the providing overall assessment of
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that Director Costello may be more familiar with this than I.
value. You were looking.
Oh, I think we've lost him.
Okay, Director Costello.
So I don't have the report in front of me, my apologies. There were 3 quotations received. One was, there was, the low bid was from Xander Plan, second low was WSP, and the third, let me just bring it up here for you. And in the report this evening, it is that the scoring was showed to everybody in the RFP report that it has been circulated. We did have an evaluation team consisting of myself, Mary Remig, and Senior Planner Grenke, who reviewed all of the submissions for compliance to the RFP. All were deemed to be in compliant. WSP did come out the front runner, even though they were not the low bid in this circumstance. So I'm just trying to open up their report to give you some figures. I think we've totally lost Carl at this point.
So I think the WSP was at 47,058.91 with a score of 87.9. And then JP2G was 78.3 at 50,432. And then the third one was less expensive, but only score 58.
True, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the staff's recommending at this point awarding to WSP. They did have the most bang for our buck with their proposal. We did score them the highest, and it was clear consensus amongst the evaluation team to award to WSP Canada Inc. They did have references as well from the other municipalities that were checked. So at this point, staff's recommendation would be to enter into an agreement for WSP and get work underway for the zoning bylaw consultation.
Great. So is there consensus to accept the recommendation for WSP's bid under budget? Councilor Brennan? Sorry.
That's okay. Hi, Carl. Are you there? Yeah, I support the recommendation. What I really liked about this this particular bid was the public engagement piece, and also virtual zoning workshop open to the community. And there was a recognition of how there's a little bit of virtual fatigue, I think, with all the engagements we have, and they're trying to make some allotment for that. So I support this, and as Carl, you were saying, long due since we've adopted a new official plan. So thanks for the good work there.
We got Councilor or Director Costello. Did you have something to add?
No, I just wanted to thank Councillor Brennan for bringing that up. That was what the main reason that WSP was awarded high points was their community engagement, the way they wanted to engage the community, and mentioning about the fatigue. One of the big pluses with WSP was their mapping, that they could harmonize with our current mapping system with this CGIS. So that was one of the big benefits with the WSP proposal as well. So thank you for that, Councillor Brennan.
Councillor Alfred, then Mayor Franco.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get this underway. Congratulations, Carl, on another pending legacy thing that you're bringing to the town. But this is going to hopefully give us some tools that reflect today's reality in Smiths Falls and in fact in Ontario and Canada. So I'm very supportive and want to get started right away. Thank you.
Great. Mayor Franco.
Yeah, I support the staff recommendation as well. I guess the question just relates to the timeline. and present the new bylaw will be proposed to be presented to council for adoption May of 2022. So just wondered, that's a year to complete this process. So I guess a couple questions. Is there a regulated steps and timeline required for a new zoning bylaw? And secondly, just that why the long timeline? My concern obviously is how it relates to the recommendations of the Housing Task Force, and the Housing Advisory Committee will be working on that. And many of those recommendations fall within the zoning bylaw. So is there, will that stuff be held up pending the adoption of the new zoning bylaw, or will be incremental as we move along?
Senior Planner Granke, if you're with us,
Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
you're good.
I'll go while I can, yes. So no, thank you for the question. I think that's the timeline is, there's a long runway, and all of the bidding companies proposed a work plan that would take about a year to finalize the bylaw. And the Planning Act's requirements are very minimal in terms of consultation, an open house, a public meeting, and then a bylaw plus the appeal period. However, to accommodate what needs to be done to get it to get the comprehensive review done, we did look for additional steps. So that is and we recognize the public and some in our development community would have a keen interest in how this unfolds, and above and beyond the requirements of the act, the work plan does propose a few consultations and public engagement processes, and also recognize that the pace and expectation of virtual consultation may be different from a traditional in-person setting. So it's fair to say that the zoning review will be tackling some major subjects that will have considerable public interest, such as housing, parking, and perhaps others. And in my experience, a major and broad project such as this might uncover some other issues that haven't brought out much public attention yet, that can become certainly significant topics of discussion. And our consultants will be looking at things like Airbnbs and those short-term rentals. So I'm hopeful that these timelines accommodate work and likely revisions on hot button zoning issues. And I'd be delighted if we did emerge ahead of schedule. And I don't think that's out of the question that we could, but I didn't want to give an expectation that we may not be able to achieve. So that's I think the rationale for why a longer timeline may be accommodated, just based on the consultation and working through the virtual virtual consultation process.
Okay, thanks, Carl. I'm just a little impatient at times.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to pick up on Mayor Panko's question, he asked something about incremental. If the Housing Task Force felt that in 6 months there was one particular bylaw that needed to be adopted or changed to get things going, I'm assuming we could do that in light of this larger scope. We're not going to stop doing business waiting for the end, are we?
Senior Planner Granke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Councillor McKenna, you're absolutely correct. Until the new bylaw is adopted and in effect, the existing zoning bylaw is in effect, and we can amend that at any time. So certainly, in the event that something urgent and pressing does arise, council can always look to amend that and adopt that. And I know, for instance, in Montague Township recently, housing was identified as there's certainly some policy work has been underway on some issues, while there is a larger, broader official plan update process. So that can be done, and certainly I would encourage council to consider that if there is something that needs to be done very urgently. If we do the policy work now, then there is the possibility it could be that policy can simply be carried forward into the future. Zoning amendments, all of those sorts of items will still continue to proceed as they do now.
Thanks, Carl. So I'm hearing a strong consensus to accept the bid from WSP Canada and direct staff to enter into a project contract with the bidder. If there's no other questions or comments, we can move on to 8.3. All right, thank you very much, Carl and Director Costello, for filling in. Chief Chesborough, we'll go back to you for the 2020 annual report from the fire department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave, if you can just put up these slides, please. As you'll note in the package you received, that there's approximately 20 slides here. We're not going to go slide by slide, but certainly I wanted to highlight some of the key factors contained within the 2020 report. Certainly our recommendation the council receive the annual report for information purposes. Our purpose is to present council the 2020 annual fire department report. The information contained in the report will provide some insight into the fire department activities for the year. The report will also contain information on fire prevention, training, details on responses, identifying time of day, type of responses, and time periods of those responses. The report will also include responses for the departments that we have 2 automatic aid agreements with, as well as the departments that we dispatch for. The final portion of the report will cover what the dispatching revenue and additional revenue initiatives that have been put in place. And lastly, on the final part of the report, we'll be covering emergency management under my portfolio. You will see this year, again, as we reported last year in 2020 or 2019, the report is based on preliminary statistics. Some of the statistics that we're not able to provide, that's only captured through the Office of the Fire Marshal, is average response times, staffing levels. They give us provincial averages and standards. The report will detail, though, specifically the types and numbers of calls that we do go through. This year's report will reflect a significant reduction in the face-to-face public education component of the Fire Prevention Division. It will also indicate the reduction in our training division, how it was directly impacted. However, we were able to maintain our prevention division legislated responsibility to conduct inspections upon complaint or request. Next slide, please, Dave. So again, Mayor, members of council, and CEO Morris, I'm pleased to present the 2020 annual report. 2020 proved to be a year that most people have never experienced. From the onset of the pandemic, the provincial state of emergency, the lockdown and stay-at-home orders, the effects were felt throughout the community. Though through these uncertain times, the fire department was able to maintain the high level of service that the community has been accustomed to. Coupled with the pandemic, we faced a reduction in staff, cancellation of in-person training, a delay in a new pumper and other equipment. Staff had a heightened concern for their safety due to the fast spreading virus, and an even greater concern for the safety of their families. As a result of the staffing shortage, the full-time firefighters did not take their vacation in 2020 in order to maintain our communications center. Certainly a true testament to the commitment and dedication of our staff towards the community. With this in mind, we enhanced our peer support program to assist the firefighters with the added stress. The program provides support and assistance 24/7 to the firefighters throughout the county who are experiencing problems with trying to balance work life and mental fitness. Often the difficult and sometimes tragic events we face affect our families. So we are fortunate to have partnered with the Wounded Warriors of Canada. This program provides support and assistance to our families and will extend access to a wide range of services, which is desperately needed in a number of situations. Over the past year, we were able to accomplish a number of initiatives. We fulfilled the filling of the vacancy with our first female career firefighter in Smith Falls. We took possession of the brand new pumper in late fall. We received the balance of our new breathing apparatus, and we were able to hire new volunteers to fill our complement. We also resumed training sessions in August. Our firefighter dedication and professionalism took center stage throughout the year. And it's certainly a privilege to be a part of a highly skilled and trained organization and to represent the men and women of the Smith Falls Fire Department. It's also extremely important that we acknowledge the support we've received from council, who have been committed to the safety and security of this community. And lastly, we wish to express our appreciation to all members of the community and our community partners for their support, who recognize the efforts that the firefighters put in on a daily basis to our community. Next slide. And that is a quick breakdown of our organizational chart. We have 3 lieutenants, we have 3 career firefighters, and we have our 18 volunteers. Next slide. And that's the staffing itself. Next slide. And again, the apparatus reflects the new pumper we took possession in the fall. Next slide. So some of the programs that I previously mentioned, the peer support program, that's a legislated component from the Office of the Fire Marshal that all municipalities and fire departments must have in place. We also brought in the Wounded Warriors of Canada, and we trained to the National Fire Protection Association standard, which is a standard now across Ontario. We also trained to the Heart and Stroke standard with regards to first aid, CPR, and defibrillator. And then we have the Fire Prevention Association, the Training Officers Association, and the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, and the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs that we draw information from. Next slide. And these are some of the activities that the firefighters were able to maintain, given the short window of opportunity from August when we resumed it up until December. It was extremely aggressive. Our training nights went a little longer, but it's critically important that we have the firefighters trained to the standard to provide the level of service. Next slide. But as we talked about, the Fire Prevention Division did witness a huge reduction in our prevention activities. In a typical year, we'd have been in the schools, we'd have been at Lanark County Housing, and providing the prevention and training programs. The one area where we did see a large increase was in burn permits. And that's directly attributed to, obviously, the stay-at-home orders. The more people at home, the more requests we had for burn permits. Fire Prevention Division provides the education to the public on a year-round basis, and unfortunately, the only way we could get it out this year is through media releases. The Fire Marshal's Public Safety Council does provide kits, which we did purchase, that once we return to the in-school, we'll be able to provide, as well as tips for seniors and businesses and the Lanark Housing. The FPPA Act requires all departments to assess and conduct inspections upon request, which we did. And finally, the Fire Prevention Division inspects and investigates all fires and reports the origin and cause to the Ontario Office of the Fire Marshal. Next slide. So to give you a 6-year rundown of just the inspection divisions, you can certainly see the drastic decrease in the number of inspections we've had based on previous years. And again, our paramount concern was for our inspectors going out to do these inspections. And again, a reduction in construction and building that was put on hold during the lockdown and stay-at-home orders. And again, the burn permits, a significant increase in the burn permits for last year. Next slide. 2020 witnessed 218 calls for the Smith Falls Fire Department. We can see by the breakdown, and I know that there'll be some questions regarding this, the 73 per calls representing 33% of our activity was false calls. These false calls are canceled en route, service is not needed upon arrival, a complaint of smoke or the smell of something, an activated fire alarm that proves just to be a dead battery. Those are some of the items that make up that 73 calls of 33% of our calls. Next slide. As I'd mentioned, our automatic aid, mutual aid. For our automatic aid agreements in Rideau Lakes, we responded 43 times. In Drummond North Elms, we responded 5 times. And then the mutual aid, which was relatively low for last year, there was 7 calls total, 6 in Montague and 1 for Merrickville, Wolford. Next slide. This slide just gives you an indication, which is certainly not shocking, to show the days of the week where the numbers are the highest, Friday and Saturday. I think that's typical right across Ontario. Next slide. And this was kind of a surprising chart that the highest percentage of calls is between noon hour and 6 o'clock at night. I would have expected it to be between 6 o'clock at night and midnight, but that seems to be what our call volume is reflecting. Next slide. We did see a 10% increase over 2019. So the 1,830 calls is fairly close to what 2018 was. We saw the reduction in 19, but we've seen the increase back in 2020. Lanark County seeing a significant increase up to 886 calls, and Highlands East with their increase up to 331 calls. Next slide. And again, this is just a breakdown by the various departments that we dispatch for, as well as Lanark County, with Lanark County representing 48% of the total call volume. Next slide. Our fire investigations, we still have 2 significant investigations that are on the go. And we've had 6 additional calls that required investigation over the course of 2020. And certainly the school fire seemed to be the largest call that we attended last year. Our dollar loss has increased over 2019. So the total dollar loss, just over $3 million for the year, with approximately $2 million being attributed to the school fire. Next slide. Dispatch revenues. The dispatch revenues, according to the contracts that we currently have in place, saw a CPI increase. So for Lanark County, it was just over 218,000. Our 2 fire protection agreements at 69 and 10. And then the other dispatch revenues for the other departments that we dispatch for, totaling 39, just over 39,500 for a total of 338,692. Next slide. Regarding emergency preparedness, the global pandemic raised many challenges for local municipalities, and most emergency plans provided little direction in dealing with the health emergency. Communication from multiple agencies added to the confusion that the public was attempting to navigate through. And we certainly witnessed this, and there was, I say it with the utmost respect, but everybody was trying to contribute to provide the level of information that our control group needed, the general public needed. And it was difficult at times to weed through the variety of information that was coming in to provide an accurate and current up-to-date information with regards to the emergency. From a municipal standpoint, we were very limited in the decisions as the province dictated the extent of business operations, school closures, and vaccine rollout. This pandemic is an emergency normally not witnessed for a municipal control group. Again, we had very limited ability to make decisions outside of what the province of Ontario was dictating. We provided information to the public through media releases and control group updates as the pandemic progressed. Our municipal control group met weekly at the onset and discussed continuity of municipal operations, scheduling the staff, working remotely, and we created a return to work policy. Further issues that were addressed identified personal protective equipment supplies, the sanitizer, the posting of the regulations. One of the big ones was the IT concerns. It became a daily reality with our Zoom and Teams platform being used and the difficulties using those platforms to communicate. Inspections for both fire and building were reduced and altered to meet the regulations and ensure protection for our inspectors. We were able to receive approval for 2 major construction projects that had started. So the Beckwith Street redevelopment and phase 2 of the municipal office renovation. When we were first hit with this in 2020, everything was shut down immediately. But through the province of Ontario and through our legal department, we were able to receive approval for those 2 projects as being critical infrastructure to be able to continue. We also had emergency childcare that was offered to essential workers to provide the ability for our workers to come to work. The testing center was set up at the hospital and the vaccination clinic was set up in the arena. The business sector was the hardest hit, and with the curbside pickup and online ordering was permitted to assist in the loss of business. And we were, again, limited in our capacity, but through the mayor and council and the mayor's task force, we were able to provide alternatives and through the various departments and alternatives to assist those businesses and food delivery efforts, as well as some short-term housing through Lanark County. So I can't say enough about our emergency control group. They provided tremendous insight through our chairman, CAO Morris, who chaired our control group meetings. we were able to do everything that we could reasonably expect to do in this type of emergency and provide the level of assistance to the community that was certainly reflected in our numbers coming down. Next slide. And just a quick fact. So in 2020, we had to do our 4-hour mandatory training. We did our 4 control group meetings. We completed our plan review. And we updated our emergency plan, and we did receive our compliance notification from the Office of the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management. The province declared the state of emergency on March 17th. We declared the emergency April the 6th. Our control group met 44 times. We averaged an additional 2 meetings a week with the OFM, Provincial Emergency Operations Center, Dr. Stewart, and the county. We established a protective clothing reserve. We added 2 additional items to our plan, obviously the health emergency and mass casualty, and we received daily calls from the public and local businesses regarding the state of emergency. And again, it's through the joint cooperation that we've been able to establish with the outside agencies that we've been able to provide the level of assistance to the public and to our community. That is my report for this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thanks, Chief Cheeseborough. Questions, comments? Councillor McKenna, then Mayor Panko.
Thanks very much, Chief, for that thorough presentation of your report. And I want to thank you and all your staff in your department for their work last year and, of course, this year. I did have a couple of questions from I hope, a high-level kind of governance, looking down at it, looking at our risks or our responsibilities to do our due diligence. I wondered, we've got your number of calls going out to support other municipalities through the mutual aid. How often did we have to call in our neighbors to help us? And perhaps next year we could have that included in the report. Maybe it didn't happen.
No, through the chair, that's an excellent question. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I do know that we did call in inside agencies a number of times. And certainly when we get calls of significant size, such as the school, we not only call those departments in to assist us at the scene, but we also provide within our mutual aid plan that's been approved by the province to backfill our station, so that in the event there's additional calls that come in while we're at a call, they provide coverage. But I will note that for next year's report.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, there's some really great data. It's rich with good information in your, Chief. Again, for next year, I wonder how are we doing in response times related to provincial standards, and if that could be included in the report next year. And finally, lost time at work is an indicator for me. If employees have to take time off because of a result of injury or accident in the workplace, it's an indicator for me at a governance level that it's something that I like to understand and watch. So if next year, if we had those response times in relation to provincial standards and any lost time injuries at work at a level, that I would find that quite helpful. But overall, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, it was an amazing year last year with not only the pandemic, we had 0 sick days for our full-time staff. Extremely extraordinary. We had no worker-related injuries. And we had no lost time for the full-time staff or the volunteers. And as I indicated in the initial report, the preliminary information with regards to average response time and staffing, those are the statistical information that is usually captured by the Office of the Fire Marshal. But because they haven't been in the office, they haven't captured those for the past 2 years. We could certainly do it if we went through call by call, to dictate that, but that normally comes down from them. It also gives you the dollar value lost outside of structure fires for vehicle fires, grass fires, or any other dollar loss fires is incorporated into their information. It provides provincially a standard across the province as to the death rate per 10,000 per 100,000 and where we fit in that category. So there's a lot of statistical information that I'd love to be able to provide. And I'm hopeful that next year that the Office of the Fire Marshal will be back to a full complement and be able to send that down to us.
Mayor Penko.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it's a fair amount of work to put this report together, but from council's perspective, I'm sure it's well received and great to have the insight. A few questions. I'll start with one, the fire marquee revenue. I know it's been in there in previous years. I didn't notice it this year.
No, through the chair, and an excellent question. And what typically happens with the fire mark revenue is when we fill out the documentation and send it off to them, when they send us, when they finally are able to collect on that through the insurance companies, then they send it back. So we've had, I think it was $1,100 that we received so far from 2020. So all the claims that have gone in for 2020 have not been received. So
Okay.
they're in the process of still collecting them.
Okay. Second question relates to dispatch contracts. And refresh my memory, are they all fixed cost plus CPI? Or are there variable costs based on volumes of calls? Just noticing that obviously the largest number of calls is Lanark County, and some of the municipalities have a very small number of calls, but two in particular, Algonquin Highlands and Highlands East, combined equate to 1/3 of our calls. And I know the overall revenue from all the small municipalities, including those two, is about $39,000 a year. So on a per call basis, it's very, very affordable, very cheap, I guess. So is there variable factors or is it simply a fixed cost plus CPI?
When the contracts were set up in 2016, they based most of the costs for the smaller municipalities on a per capita basis. They also reflected in the 5-year contract that halfway through that contract, there would be an additional cost for mapping and any communication updates that would be required. But the only increase that was incorporated into those contracts was a CPI increase on a yearly basis. Lanark County contract was based differently. It wasn't based on the numbers. They negotiated a fixed rate. And again, that is also a CPI yearly index. Year 2.5 or year 3, that is where the additional mapping costs would come in play, that we would forward off all their and bill accordingly per municipality or per the county that we would add on to their annual bill.
So some of those are coming due in the near future, I assume then.
2022, 2023 are the contract renewal periods. And that is outside of the automatic aid agreements that we are currently reviewing. I'm currently reviewing with CAO Morris with our 2 automatic aid partners.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I have one final question, if that's okay. Thank you. Pump rate 20. So we replaced that last year with pump rate 21, I think it is. Great new pumper, but we still have 820. I know in the past when we've replaced a fire truck, we have sold off the old one or did something with it. Will that be coming to council in the near future for a decision on its future?
Well, there's through the chair, there's a number of factors that are going to assist us on our decision with regards to the keeping of that vehicle or the removing the vehicle. That vehicle is a tremendous asset, not only for training, but also as a backup in the event something happens to the new vehicle, or if we have multiple calls on the go. that vehicle can be brought back over to the main hall and be used as a second response vehicle. So there's a number of pros to go along with that. The maintenance cost is extremely low for the vehicle. It'll receive its annual inspection at a cost, I believe it's around $350 a year to do its annual inspection, its MTO inspection and pump testing. And again, we like to, especially in the training division, use that vehicle and not take the new one out of service while we're conducting the training, but to keep the new one in service and use that as a training tool. And again, there's a number of calls that we go to that second vehicle would be either a water supply vehicle at a static source or a hydrant source for the filling and movement of tankers as they're coming in and out, depending on where we go.
Yeah, with respect, I'd like to see that come to council with a broader discussion on the pros and cons. I mean, at some point in time, we would anticipate more repairs, more cost that may have to go into it. It may have value today. And I appreciate the having it as a backup. I also respect we've got our aerial device is also a pumper. So I'd like to have a more fulsome discussion on that before we sort of determine the outcome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councillor Alford.
Just Chief, both Councilor McCann and Mayor Panko have covered quite a bit. So with regard to the false fire calls, so that's a good chunk of your responses. Is this typical in other municipalities that it be 33% of the calls? Is that typical?
Through the chair, that is typical, and depending on how each department fills in their SIR, their standard incident report, they might incorporate different types of calls in their false alarms. And I know what they've done here in the past with regards to false alarms. Again, they put the canceled en route. If they've gone over with a half ton to check out a smell of something or someone perceives something. But there are a number of false alarms right across Ontario for every department.
And what could you give me an example of what again, it's a large percentage of our responses. Can you give me an example of what an other would be?
Let me just bring that up here on the screen. Make sure I'm speaking about the right thing.
Cat in a tree or was?
Yes, and why we laugh at that, we've received 6 calls for 6 cats in a tree. We received calls for a dog stuck in a culvert. There's a variety of other types of calls, and they could be perceived emergencies where there's nothing. And again, they're not. We could have looped them all into false calls, but it's better to break it out so it properly reflects it. And I think breaking it out even further in the false calls would provide a better insight as exactly what they're responding to. So
Well, again, is there an education piece, that needs so that we don't have as many burning up the time of our professional firefighters. Other than that, Chief, I think most of my questions were answered previously, and like everyone at this table, at this horseshoe, well, not a virtual horseshoe, really appreciate the work that you in particular and all of the emergency measures group did this year. I have some sense of how many meetings and how many uncomfortable conversations you had at that table. So I know all of us really appreciate the work that went into handling COVID and is continuing to.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. I have a few questions too. For the response times and the response numbers, while we're waiting for the provincial data, is it possible to get that in comparison to previous years' data, just to give us that kind of benchmark of where we're at?
We could, again, we would have to go back and do call by call for everything in 2019 because we were unable to provide that level of detail in 19. We would have to do it for 19 and 20 to give you a comparison to 2018 and previous.
So the best option is to wait for 2022, get the full numbers from the province, and we'll have a snapshot again.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. And do we have any idea of attendance rates per call, or is that roped into the provincial stuff too?
That's in the provincial standard as well.
Okay, and last question, do we track the full cost of per call for each contract so that internally we just have a good idea of what this is costing us if we're going into negotiations in the next couple of years?
And I think you're referring to the automatic aid cost or the
dispatch, sorry.
dispatching. Well, the dispatching costs, again, we have a full-time staff member, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's the cost to run that dispatch center, along with the equipment, and any repairs or any upgrades. And again, we're looking at, it was 2019, I believe the radio equipment was to be replaced. The police went first, and we held off waiting for the next generation 911, as well as the Eastern Ontario regional network, as well as what the county was doing. And I can provide council with an update that the county has initiated an RFP and awarded a contract for the infrastructure review and assessment. And we undertook an assessment of our radio equipment internally, our dispatching equipment. So both of those will factor into what our annual costs are going to be and what the cost of a radio upgrade is going to be, or a change in a system. And we're hoping to have that as soon as the county has done theirs, put the numbers together. But our cost for the automatic aid agreement, as an example, in Drummer North Elmsley, we responded 5 times for a revenue of 10,500, just over 10,000. Rideau Lakes was approximately 70,000 for 43 calls. So we're going to reevaluate, it's going to be based reviewing the contents of the folder. When Mayor Staples was involved in the original contract writing, the contract expired 11 years ago with Rideau Lakes and has just gone year to year as included in the contract. So I think it's long overdue that a review and an up-to-date agreement be reached between the town of Smith Falls and the township of Rideau Lakes.
Great. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, I think we're good to bring that to council, I believe, tonight. So thank you very much, Chief, for getting this done with all of the extra COVID work. So have a good night. Our last item for tonight's agenda is 8.4 with CAO Morris, a strategic plan update report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have the report with you, so I'll provide a higher level overview of our progress on our strategic plan, your strategic plan. Always a delight to put this together because it's a great way to kind of take stock of what we've accomplished and what we have yet to accomplish, more importantly. So as a general statement, I would say over the last 6 months, and of course we do this every 6 months, I would say we've made tremendous progress given the circumstances we've been working in. Having said that, there's much more to do, but I will just kind of touch on the highlights of each of the priorities, and of course there are 6 of them. In the housing area, we had a discussion about that earlier this evening. So the strategy was approved in December of 2020. We have a housing advisory committee. And they meet tomorrow, so that's certainly well underway. The other big item there was the development charges study, which we had an initial report from the consultant, so they're busily working on that right now, and we should have something back to you probably in June, I believe, as another interim update. So that's moving along. Priority 2, we have the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is underway. Lots of public consultation going on there. We've had great response from the public. It's been very encouraging to see the amount of participation and interest in Parks and Recreation. We had one of our items is expanding the tree canopy or the urban forest, and so we've been doing some work on that. We had access to 200 trees earlier this month and gave them away, and they went out the door in the first 2 minutes. It was incredible. So I think that's symbolic of the appetite for more trees in Smiths Falls. These went to private landowners, but that was I think very clear indication of the work that we have yet to do on the canopy project. Priority 3 is transportation. So lots happening there. Of course, Beckwith Phase 2 is underway with the planning and design work. The consultants will be back, I think, on the 14th of June, certainly in June, to provide us an update on some of the public consultation that's happened and the comments that committee had provided, so that we can complete the design. We have money in the budget this year to complete the design and get the project tender ready. We do not have money in the budget to execute the contract and start the work. Council will recall just recently we had the Connecting Links approval, so we have a really good start on funding the project. It's estimated to be around 5 million, just north of $5 million, so not an insignificant amount of money. So likely in the summer, certainly the third quarter, we'll be bringing back that information and to have a discussion about your wishes in terms of timing for that project. And if there was a desire to begin it this year, we can lay out some options to achieve that if you wish. So lots more to come on Beckwith Phase 2. A couple of other important RFPs that have been just let. The Confederation Bridge environmental assessment. I know that's on the plan, and I know we need to get to a point of making a decision on that one. The environmental assessment will lay out the options in very clear terms, so we expect to award that soon. That'll be coming back to council for approval. The other one is the active transportation plan. The RFP is out on it. It closes Thursday. We've had a lot of interest. So two big, well, policy decisions really coming forward in those areas. And then of course we talked about Lombard, Abbott, and that's starting. The waterfront development and placemaking, we've done a lot of work, a lot of interaction with Parks Canada in terms of pathways and lighting. We are working presently on the new pathway through the Victoria Park lands. We're having discussions about lighting certain assets to make them come to life at night, so to speak. So that's underway. Moving along to priority 5, this is the tourism priority. So a lot of these have been accomplished thanks to Ms. Miller. We are in the midst of a feasibility review of a cycling tourism plan. So we got funding to do that. So we'll bring that back and that'll inform us whether we should be moving forward with a cycling tourism strategy. So that's the big one in that area. Of course, Victoria Park Campground, that decision was made in the last 6 months. The last priority is the town hall and town square. So phase 1 of the town square, as we know, is moving along. We've closed the small section of Daniel Street. The de-pave work will begin in short order. So that's going to be an exciting project. The bandstand is going to be put in place this year and some landscaping around it. So we'll see great progress. We've had great progress in terms of planning and developing that project. We'll actually see some sod being pavement being removed and sod being laid, so that project's going to come to life this summer. And the phase 3 town hall, of course, I'll just remind you, we do have a degree of funding this year to get the design finished, get it tender ready. Again, we'll need to have a discussion about where you want to slot that in terms of getting that work underway, but we'll have it tender ready by the autumn. So a lot of work has happened over the last 6 months, and it's setting the stage for these projects to, as I said, come to life over the next 6 months to a year. So at that point, I'll pause. The report has a breakdown. We use the same dashboard format. Anything that's occurred in the last 6 months is shown in red text to delineate it from stuff we've already accomplished. So I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Great, thanks, CEO Morris. We'd like to start it off. Councillor Alford.
There's a couple things occurred to me as I was going through it, and that how valuable it is to have a strategic plan, and so that we can, or any council can, maintain focus on what you and staff can maintain focus on what you're trying to accomplish. I do want to give credit to the last council for leaving a roadmap that we had very little to change, put our own priorities and vision into it, but that the last council and staff that assisted came up with a fairly great structure as to how to deliver these kinds of things. And the second thing that occurred to me after I was going through it was that this was not to be reminded that the advancement and completion of this council's very ambitious strategic plan owes a staggering amount of credit to town staff for getting us here, for getting as many things off the list, and doing it in the middle of a global pandemic and all that meant to them. So I could not look at this thing without thinking about how much staff work in. Council does a lot of talking and makes a lot of decisions and has a lot of meetings, but we don't deliver it. The staff does. And I think we need to really remember and recognize that. Other than that, the only thing that I would like to get to as quickly as possible is having some measurable change in each of our playground. And I know we all feel similarly, and it'll be a list, but that's one thing that I think we came up to when we were strategizing, that all of us were in agreement. We'd like to see something that people can see and use on a daily basis. Other than that, I'm very happy with how we have progressed through this very ambitious strategic plan. So thank you, Malcolm, for the leadership on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a roadmap, and I could pick questions out of here till the cows come home, and I'm not going to do that tonight. But I can see it coming down the pipe, and then when it comes down the pipe, then we'll discuss it then. But yeah, it's logical and it makes sense. And thanks for all your work on it. So we'll talk about all the rest of the stuff as it comes.
Councillor McKenna.
Yeah, well done to all the staff, CO Morris. Councillor Alford covered it pretty well. The only thing she didn't say was, plus all the other work that staff do to run the day-to-day operations. It's like, this is on top of everything they're already doing. So thank you. I did have a specific question on under priority number 6 and item 6.3. It says that the architecture actively developing the floor plans for council chambers and stakeholder consultations are underway. I know that my colleagues and I were interested in as being stakeholders in the lounge and in the council chambers of participating in some of that conversation. And I assume that that's coming our way from the architectural team.
Yes, through the chair, we met with them on Friday last and had a good discussion about providing a few floor plans to incent a dialogue at committee. So they'll be coming forward on the 14th of June with a couple of options for you to consider.
Thank you.
And I would just like to note that we have a incredibly dedicated team of staff that make these things happen, and my thanks to them.
Thanks to you, Morris. I had a couple questions too. The first was for items like 2.2 and 2.5, where we've got 5% increase in forest, 50% reduction in illegal dumping. How are we tracking and measuring those year over year?
Yeah, great question. The illegal dumping one, we have records of calls that we respond to. So that the metric there is relatively easy to measure. The tree canopy, we do, we're gonna have a student this year do some work on measuring the canopy, and there's two broad approaches to that. I won't get too detailed, but you can either measure, you know, from a satellite view and look at the actual cover, how much shade are you producing, or you can measure it by stump or tree. And of course, a sapling has a different canopy impact than a 80-year-old maple. So we need to develop a methodology to measure that. So at this point, it's been, let's get more trees in the ground, but we need a much more quantitative approach to it. So your point's well taken, and we do intend to do some work on that this summer. The intent was to do it last summer, but we weren't able to employ the students that we had hoped to bring in to do that work.
Oh, that'll be great to see the update from that. Other question is on, we've got 2.4, the Parks Master Plan, Q2 2021, and the Tangible Improvement, Q3 2021. How far do we expect those to get pushed with the fact that the master plan's still underway?
Well, I think, you know, the master plan's on track to come forward in the third quarter. So by the time it's, you know, fully approved, it might be the fourth. So we're tracking fairly close to schedule on that one. And I'm sorry, what was the other one?
The agreeing on the tangible improvement to each park.
Oh, yeah. So a lot of work happening there. So obviously the master plan will inform that, but at the same time, we have a parallel study going on. I think Director Manhire may have mentioned this recently. We're doing a condition assessment of all of our playground equipment across the town. And we have the preliminary results of that work, which we will be bringing forward. So we'll overlay kind of the master vision with the reality on the ground and weave those together so you can make decisions on where you want to invest in playground equipment. The reality is we haven't invested to the extent perhaps we should have in the recent past. So we have a bit of catching up to do in that area. But once we get the data and have a conversation about strategic or appropriate locations, then you can start making decisions and we can get to work installing it.
Great. My last question is 4.2. It's the develop a phasing plan to complete waterfront trail, bridges, wayfinding, etc. And the status for that one is planned for remediation of Victoria Park trail section being developed with Parks Canada. And I was just wondering how that $25,000 related to that, or what kind of work was being done there.
Yeah, so the 25K in the budget was actually for the section from Beckwith on that we ran into some difficulties getting that done. So we've pivoted and looked at the trail through Victoria Park as a starting point. But there's a lot of work to weave together the whole network of trails, and the active transportation plan will help inform that as well. I